The Civat Strip Cafe opened at 6. I was usually there by 5:40, checking the boiler in the utility corridor behind the kitchen, because the building's heating loop ran through that wall, and the pressure gauge had a slow leak that nobody had fixed in 3 years. Not my job to fix it. My job was to check it, log it, and move the problem to the right desk. I did that every Tuesday and Friday, and on the other mornings I came anyway because the manager, a round-faced Thelvan man named Osiv, let me have a coffee at the counter before the doors opened. He said it was because I once tracked down a water main fault at 2 in the morning before it flooded his storage room. I think it was also because nobody else was there yet and he liked the company. That was how I first saw her. She came in at 10 to 6 on a Tuesday in early spring, still in her coat, a small canvas bag over one shoulder. She unlocked the back without being told where the key was kept. She tied on the cafe apron, dark green, the Civat Strip logo on the chest, and went straight to the filter machine without looking up. I was sitting at the end of the counter with my coffee. Osiv introduced us across the pass-through window. "Doran, this is our new morning shift. She'll be doing the counter." I nodded. She glanced at me once, just enough to register that a person was sitting there, and then turned back to the filter machine. Her name tag said Seni. The other staff, when they came in, called her VR0091. That was her compact resettlement number. You could see it on the registration card Osiv kept in the folder behind the till, required by the local transit authority for any non-citizen worker. Some of the afternoon staff used it as shorthand. Not unkindly, just efficiently, the way people use whatever label arrives first. I called her Sene because that was what the name tag said, and it seemed like the least a person could do. She didn't react the first time, not the second or the third. But around the second week, I noticed that when I said it, she would pause for a fraction of a second before she answered, the way a person does when something unexpected lands in familiar territory. After the third week, the pause was gone. She'd answer straight, quick, without thinking, the way you answer to your own name. The thing I noticed next was how she set down a cup. It wasn't a trained thing, you could tell it wasn't from the cafe. She just did it. She'd place the cup in front of whoever was waiting, with the handle turned toward their waiting hand, so they'd never have to rotate it. A small thing, the kind of thing that takes no extra time but requires that you've already thought about the other person before they've thought about themselves. I started doing it back. I didn't plan to. I just noticed one morning that she'd set my cup that way, and the next morning I was early and she hadn't come yet, so I poured my own from Osiv's pot and set it down handle toward myself the way she would have, because it was the right way to do it. When she came in and saw it, she stopped. She looked at the cup. Then she looked at me. I shrugged. "It's the right way," I said. She didn't smile, but something shifted at the back of her pale silver eyes, something that had been held very still, that allowed itself to move a fraction. After that, we had a kind of grammar. Nothing spoken. She'd set my cup, I'd set hers. On the mornings, Osiv let her take a short break before the rush. We never discussed it. We never discussed much at all. She wasn't unfriendly. She was careful. There's a difference. I learned things the way you learn things about a person in a building you both occupy every day. She read on her break, always the same kind of material. Dense text, small type, a language I didn't recognize. She kept her dark teal hair pinned flat and short under the cafe cap, but in the light from the front windows you could see it wasn't naturally flat. It had a texture that the pins were containing. Her skin was pale gold amber in a way that looked right in morning light, and slightly wrong in the fluorescent kitchen strips, like a color that belonged in a different latitude. She wore plain glass frames that sat on her nose and corrected nothing, because her eyes were already fine. I figured that out around month 4. I didn't say anything. What she was, I didn't know. Not exactly. Compact resettlement numbers starting with VR covered a broad category of non-citizen residents from dissolved or disputed territories. It was an administrative bin, not a description. I wasn't the sort of person who pressed. She showed up every morning. She did the work. She said my name, Doran, with a precision that suggested she'd decided how it sounded and was sticking to it. That was enough. 11 months is a long time to share a counter with someone in silence, and come to understand that the silence is a kind of holding. I found out later, much later, after everything, that she had been warned explicitly not to invoke her family name or her territorial lineage while her asylum petition was under review. The Compact's registry had absorbed the Oru seat into its dissolved territories classification 8 years before she arrived on the strip. If she named herself Sene Vel Oru in front of a transit official, the petition would be flagged as a false identity claim, because the Oru seat officially no longer existed, and therefore so did its heirs. She'd been given a number and told that the number was, for now, the safest thing she had. So she wore the plain glass frames and the cafe apron and the name tag that said only Sene, and she set coffee cups handle first for 11 months, and I called her by the one name she was allowed to keep. I don't know what that meant to her. I know what it looked like. It looked like a person learning, very slowly, that one corner of a room was safe. The morning they came, it was a Friday. 2 of them. Tall, both of them, in the kind of formal cut coats that don't come from anywhere near this transit block. Dark charcoal with a narrow border at the collar in a color I didn't have a name for, somewhere between old copper and dried ink. They stood at the cafe door a full minute before opening it, the way people stand when they're confirming a location they've been traveling toward for a long time. Asif saw them from the kitchen and came to the pass-through with a look I hadn't seen on him before. Behind me, I heard the small sound of a cup being set down. I turned. She was standing at the near end of the counter. She'd taken off the plain glass frames. She held them in one hand, the earpiece between 2 fingers, and she was looking at the door with an expression I can only describe as someone who has been waiting for something they were not sure they still wanted. Then she looked at me. She crossed the counter, not the door, the counter, in my direction, and she stopped 2 feet away. She straightened, and I understood then what the cafe apron and the flat-pinned hair and the plain glass had been containing all this time, because without them she was someone the room adjusted to. Even the fluorescent strips seemed to sit differently on her skin. She said quietly, "My name is Seni Vel Oru. I am the last registered heir of the Oru seat, Catherine third succession line." She paused. "I wanted you to know that before I told anyone else in this room." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "I know. You set coffee cups the right way." Something moved through her face that I think was the closest she'd come to laughing in 11 months. Her pale silver eyes were bright, not wet, not breaking, just lit, the way a window looks when the sun finally clears the building across the street. "That is not how I expected you to answer," she said. "It's how I had it," I said. She held my gaze for another second. Then she turned and walked to the door, and when the 2 figures in the charcoal coats saw her face, really saw it, frames gone, posture clear, one of them put a hand to their own collarbone and inclined their head in a way that looked very old and very specific. The other held the door. Asif came to stand beside me at the counter. We watched her walk out into the morning light of the strip, where a vehicle I'd taken for a courier transport sat at the curb with its running lights still on. She didn't look back. But when she reached the door of the vehicle, she stopped. She turned once, just briefly, toward the cafe window. I was still standing at the counter. I picked up my cup and set it back down, handle toward the door. I don't know if she saw it. I think she did. The cafe was quiet for a long time after. Asif eventually went back to the kitchen. I finished my coffee and logged the boiler gauge. Pressure holding, no change since Tuesday, and wrote it in the maintenance book the way I always did. Her name was still on the staff board, Sen, in Asif's handwriting, next to the morning shift slot. I left it there.